In every nation's political journey, there comes a moment when loyalty is tested. When a man must choose between staying silent or walking away. This is the story of Obi, a man whose name came to symbolize integrity, simplicity, and hope, and how the party he helped build, the People's Party, turned its back on him at the height of his promise. For years, Obi believed in unity, in the idea that politics could serve people, not just power. But what he didn't know was that behind closed doors, the whispers of ambition had already begun. Obi joined the People's Party at a time when it was struggling to rebuild its image. The party needed a man who was clean, relatable, and respected across tribes. He was everything the people admired: disciplined, modest, and practical. Markets cheered when he walked through. Students quoted his speeches about frugality and accountability. Inside the party, his rise was quiet but steady. He didn't beg for power, his humility drew it to him. Within a few years, Obi became one of the most talked about figures, a symbol of change within a party that many believed had lost its way. But power has its rules, and humility rarely fits in them. It began like a whisper in the hallways of strategy meetings. Senior members told Obi, "Your time is near." They said the next election would be different, that the party needed a new face, a man with credibility. Obi believed them. He worked tirelessly, traveling across states, defending party ideals on television, building bridges with people who never thought they'd support his side. He brought calmness to chaos, and structure to disorder. But behind the polished smiles of party elders, another plan was already unfolding, one that would leave Obi standing alone in the end. As the election approached, alliances began to shift. The same voices that once praised him started avoiding his calls. Meetings were held without his knowledge. Rumors spread that he was too independent, too disciplined, too difficult to control. The system didn't want a man who couldn't be bought. It wanted someone predictable, someone who would play by their rules. And so, when the party finally announced its flag bearer, the nation was stunned. Obi's name was missing. In its place was a familiar figure, an older, wealthier man who had long mastered the game of political survival. For Obi, it wasn't just political loss, it was personal betrayal. Obi didn't call a press conference. He didn't insult anyone. He simply stepped back. When journalists asked him what went wrong, he smiled faintly and said, "Sometimes silence is the loudest response." But inside, the pain was deep. He had given his loyalty, his time, his ideas, only to be replaced by the very system he sought to reform. Friends told him to fight back, to expose the betrayal. But he refused. Instead, he left the People's Party quietly, not in bitterness, but in purpose. He knew that the people were watching, and sometimes the most powerful revolution starts with quiet dignity. When news broke of his departure, reactions were explosive. Some said he was weak for leaving. Others called him brave. But the streets told a different story. Markets that once ignored politics now chanted his name. Youths who had given up on elections suddenly cared again. By walking away, Obi didn't lose relevance, he found it. And as the People's Party entered the next election, the cracks began to show. Internal conflicts. Suspicion. Loss of public trust. The same arrogance that betrayed Obi became their undoing. While the People's Party fought itself, Obi built something new. Not a movement of money, but of minds. Not a club of elites, but a voice for the ordinary citizen. His campaign was simple: let's do politics differently. And across the country, that message caught fire. Suddenly, a man once seen as too quiet became the loudest voice for accountability. Young people designed posters for free. Volunteers campaigned without pay. The establishment laughed at first, until they realized this wasn't a noise that could be silenced. It was a call for change. Meanwhile, in the boardrooms of the People's Party, guilt lingered. Some of the same men who plotted his removal now admitted in private that they had underestimated him. One senior figure reportedly said, "We created our biggest rival." They tried to discredit him, but the more they attacked, the stronger his support grew. Because betrayal, when seen by millions, turns into sympathy, and sympathy turns into power. The air was thick with tension as the election season approached. Across the nation, posters of familiar faces filled the streets. Yet, among the crowd of seasoned politicians stood one man who carried no burden of scandals, no trace of old political games, Obi. For many, he wasn't just another candidate, he was a symbol of what politics could be if done right. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very party that once silenced him, the People's Party, now found itself facing the storm it created. In strategy rooms across the country, whispers of regret filled the air. Senior party members who once dismissed Obi as too idealistic now watched in disbelief as his message of accountability and simplicity began to dominate the national conversation. He didn't have the biggest budget, but he had something money couldn't buy: trust. Everywhere he went, crowds followed. His rallies were not like others: no hired dancers, no rented crowds, no empty promises. Instead, people came voluntarily, wearing hand-drawn shirts, chanting his name with hope in their voices. "This is our time," they shouted. Meanwhile, inside the People's Party, things were falling apart. Disagreements over funding, candidates, and strategy tore the once mighty organization apart. Those who had plotted Obi's downfall now found themselves struggling to explain the party's fading influence. Journalists often asked Obi about his former party, hoping he'd strike back. But he never did. His replies were calm, measured, and disarming. "I have no anger," he said in one interview. "They helped me discover that loyalty should never be to a party, but to the people." It was a statement that resonated across the nation, and unsettled his rivals. While others fought for endorsements and backroom deals, Obi focused on people. He visited schools, hospitals, and local markets, reminding citizens that leadership should be about service, not status. His humility disarmed critics, while his courage inspired the young. As election day drew near, the country felt divided, not by ethnicity or religion, but by ideology. There were those who wanted the old way to continue, and those who believed it was time for something new. In one particularly emotional moment, during a final campaign rally, Obi stood before a massive crowd and said, "I forgive everyone who doubted me, who betrayed me, who underestimated me. Because what matters now is not who wins power, but who restores hope." The words echoed through the air like a sermon, drawing thunderous applause. For many, it was more than politics, it was redemption. When the results finally came, the story was mixed. The People's Party still had influence, but Obi had captured something far more valuable: the heart of the people. His face became the emblem of possibility, proof that integrity, even when betrayed, could still rise above politics. In defeat, he found legacy. In betrayal, he found purpose. And in silence, he found power. In the end, history remembered not the betrayal, but the transformation that followed. Obi's story became a mirror for every honest man who ever worked within a corrupt system and wondered if integrity still mattered. He showed that betrayal can be a blessing, a painful push toward destiny. If he had stayed, he might have been silenced. By leaving, he found his voice. The People's Party eventually faded into the background, struggling to regain public trust. But Obi's movement, built on truth, empathy, and discipline, became the new moral compass of Nigerian politics. In classrooms and marketplaces, his journey was told not as a tale of defeat, but of rebirth. Because sometimes, the deepest betrayal comes not from enemies, but from friends, and sometimes, that betrayal becomes the beginning of freedom. As the years passed, Obi remained the same: calm, focused, unbothered. He didn't celebrate revenge, he celebrated renewal. And in a nation where politics often feels like a battlefield of ego and money, his story reminded millions that leadership can still be built on character. The betrayal that was meant to end him became his introduction to history. The silence that followed became his loudest speech. And the party that turned its back on him unknowingly opened the door to a revolution, one that changed the face of Nigerian politics forever. In the end, Obi proved one thing beyond doubt. You can betray a man, but you can't betray an idea whose time has come.